BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Alright, hello everybody. Today is Friday, and Anything Goes Friday, where any subject is fair game. Welcome to the show. Today we're going back to 1953 to discuss the death of Paul Rubin and a mysterious cipher, cryptogram, or some type of bizarre message that had been left behind alongside his body. First, I need to give a shout out to Dirt Poor Richard, who contacted me at the email address. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. That's posted in the description box here. And this was one that was requested by one of the listeners. If anybody has any ideas for a future episode, you can put your idea in the comments section. Write me at that email, BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. I'm also getting requests for episodes into the Facebook page now, and there's a link to my Facebook in the description box as well. Many ways that you can contact the show, and the easiest way to request a topic is to just put your idea in the comments section here on YouTube. But because this is a topic that was requested by one of the listeners, I'm rather new to this, and I had to start from the ground up, from the absolute beginnings, or you could say page one, if you will, because I would like to give a shout out to whoever runs the website, the Cipher Foundation, and they have a page here on Paul Rubin and the cipher that was found on his body when he died in 1953, and there's a particular reason why I want to read this off here. Paul Emanuel Rubin was an 18-year-old chemistry student from Brooklyn, New York, whose body was found near Philadelphia International Airport on the 20th of January, 1953. He had died from cyanide poisoning. Taped to his abdomen was an as-yet undecrypted ciphertext. And there is a cipher here that is part of it's in words, but then the second half of it switches over to some sort of numerical combination, and the concluding part says, want datum, and there's a name, Tywood Janissy Ketele, RQR6, and then Alia Kawai PER. That is the conclusion of it. This episode is going to first discuss some of the circumstances surrounding Paul Rubin's death, and then, in the later part, I will try to propose maybe some sort of original response to this very, very cryptic solution, or for this very, very cryptic message, propose a solution to this cryptic message, and so please stay tuned until the end. But the next thing I wanted to share is, the reason why I'm reading off this message from the Cipher Foundation is, they posted the FBI case file where it says the 142 file was provided by the FBI in response to a request for information by Craig Bauer for his book Unsolved. And sadly it turned up after the book was complete. But yes, there are 142 FBI documents that have been declassified, and if you read through this thing, it's available on Cipher Foundation's website. You can see all of the declassified stickers, and I tried my best to read through the entirety of it, and we will go through some of the things in the FBI report about the death of Paul Rubin and the cryptic message that was found taped to his body in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I think let's get right into this, and I want to reinforce some of the points that we've already said. Paul Rubin was 18 years old at the time. He was studying chemistry at New York University, but he was found in Philadelphia, and he also Well, they had this message taped to him with the numbers and the letters that no one quite can make out, but he died from cyanide poisoning, so instantly I thought that this was going to be a murder case. The original title for this episode was going to be The Murder of Paul Rubin, but very early on I learned that that is not quite the case. And as we go through the FBI report, you will see a lot of the reasons about why bureaucracy and government are just absolutely out of control. And you will also see a particular name, J. Edgar Hoover, sometimes written as John Edgar Hoover. Yeah, going back that far in time. Let's look at the first thing that I found that could have been significant. And this is something that was written by Joseph Aminsky, the coroner. My dear Director, this is to acknowledge your recent communication which was in reply to mine concerning the investigation made into the death of Paul Emanuel Rubin, who, as you may recall, was found dead in the vicinity of the International Airport at Philadelphia. Now, I believe when they say in the vicinity, they're talking about an administration building. Paul was found near the admin building of the airport, as opposed to like being in a terminal or being in like a shuttle bus waiting area, something to that effect. As a former member of the staff of the United States Attorney General, I do not understand the reason which makes it impossible to supply me with the necessary information that I may complete my file and hold a formal inquest in the matter. Now I'm going to jump ahead to the final paragraph of this one where it says, at this point, I cannot determine as yet whether this death was a suicide or a homicide, and I thought that your department could be of some help to me in my final determination of that matter, and very truly yours, Joseph Aminsky, the coroner. This was the first time when I was like, well, I guess it's possible that this could have been a suicide. As someone who was very unfamiliar with the case, I immediately thought it was going to be a murder, as I said, but once you begin to think about it, well, some things can persuade you in a different way. And if you're very familiar with the death of Paul Rubin and the Rubin Cipher, please put your ideas in the comment section below. Correct me if I misstate anything. And if you're someone who is just very curious about it, one more time, you can get this case file online. I'm always tempted to say the entirety of the case file, but they never release the entire case files to anything, not even the Zodiac Killer mystery. There are always going to be additional documents that have either been withheld or lost and misplaced, or even things that they genuinely want to withhold for certain reasons, even though they've been allegedly declassified. But looking at some things from his file, it says that originally he was an unknown white male that was found in the vicinity of Philadelphia International Airport, and they believe that the death could have been a matter of internal security, because in this cipher, there are two words that are written in plain English. A lot of it sounds like gobbledygook, but there are the names Dulles and Conant. You'll remember the Senator Dulles from the Kennedy years, right? Well, then there's the famous Allen Dulles and the famous John Dulles, and there's also the name Conant, who was the I'm always tempted to say ambassador, but not ambassador. Conant was the High Commissioner to West Germany at the time, and I didn't know that prior to looking into this case. But these two were found in there, so they thought that this could possibly have been connected to some sort of act of espionage. And that's the long story short. There are three major theories in this one. And that is the first, that it was a suicide. The second is that somebody had Paul Rubin murdered because maybe he knew some information, that he was targeted specifically. And the third one is that just a case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, that he wasn't killed because of some act of espionage, and they wanted to get this coded message maybe to the FBI director, to J. Edgar Hoover, or just to somebody. It was a matter of getting somebody's attention. But another point is that it says that unknown white male is found dead in the vicinity. Paul Rubin was not identified immediately. He did not have an ID on him, and we will get to some of that later on. But let's keep those three theories in mind: suicide, specific target, or wrong place at the wrong time. And there were going to be some questionable things surrounding the activities of Paul Rubin, and they even wanted to look into his alleged interest in science fiction. On January 21st, 1953, Sergeant James Tague, a Philadelphia Police Department officer, mentioned previously advised that during the course of his interview, the deceased parents, Sam and Bessie Rubin, on January 25th, 1953, stated that their son was extremely interested in science fiction activities and had done profuse reading on this subject matter. Well, that is hardly anything that could be interpreted in any direction. At this point, though, I mean, if we're just starting out the recording, I think that that should never be something that is going to be the immediate go-to, because so many people would be like, oh, well, this person liked this type of books, therefore it influenced their activities in a destructive way. It definitely influences your life, but to make the assumption that it's destructive is just that. It's making an assumption. Now let's go down to the results here on this part of the case file where it says, on February 5th, 1953, homicide detectives Frank Kelly and Edward Shriver, to whom the Paul Rubin case is assigned in the Philadelphia Police Department, advised that the homicide squad had concluded its investigation in the case and had uncovered no evidence indicating that the subject's death was a homicide. They added that while the case remained pending until the coroner's inquest, they were convinced as a result of their investigation that the subject's death was a suicide with no extenuating circumstances. And you'll see here this is marked at page 10. This is one of the earlier documents in the file. So I had somewhat of a reversal. I mean, when I heard that this guy died from cyanide poisoning, and I didn't find this website with the case file immediately. I was just reading around on other websites, trying to learn some info about Paul Rubin, and as I said, my first instinct was that it was a murder. The second thing is, if you read up on any of the websites that share any info about Paul Rubin other than Cipher Foundation, you might find this one particular line. Many people suspect that this was a murder because if he died from cyanide poisoning, where was the vial? Where was the container? Where was the bottle? Where was any sort of thing that he could have used to store the cyanide in? I mean, even if it's being held in some type of different capsule or something to that effect, well, where is it? And that's why some people begin to think that this is a murder, and that, I mean, you gotta think, though, he is a chemistry student, that is one thing. But in all of the theories, there are additional layers to them. And one of the reasons why they think that this may have been a suicide is Paul Rubin's own mother went on the record saying that she thought that this was not a case of espionage, not a case of anything other than Paul Rubin committed suicide, and he had the cipher taped to his body because he wanted to add a layer of mystery around his death. And yeah, that's the thing that they're trying to go into, that he's influenced by science fiction and he wanted to act like he was some type of character in a science fiction story, even to the point of death. But is that really what happened, or was he murdered because he had connections to somebody? And we are going to find out that Paul Rubin does have connections to some groups and organizations. But first, I would like to read something that was included in that case file, and it's an assembly of documents that have been put together, a compilation, if you will. And this is just an old newspaper clipping about the death of Paul Rubin. When NYU sophomore Paul Rubin left his Brooklyn home one morning last week, he was, so far as his parents could see, composed and happy. When his body was found in a ditch the next day at Philadelphia's International Airport, the police, the coroner's office, and the FBI, who were handed one of the strangest deaths on record, puzzled on. Paul Rubin had died of cyanide poisoning, but since the body was sitting bolt upright, the spectacles were undisturbed, and no vials or containers were found nearby, murder seemed a strong possibility. The clues were something out of a detective's fiction. Rubin's pockets contained an empty .38 caliber cartridge shell, a photograph of a plane with a Nazi swastika I totally butchered that, Nazi swastika on its tail, and a snapshot of Rodin's statue, The Thinker. Taped to his stomach was a coded message containing the words Dulles and Conant, apparently a reference to the new Secretary of State and the new High Commissioner of Germany. FBI experts are still trying to crack both the code and the mystery. And well, this is part of the case file. I'm not sure the exact publication in which this article was published, or else I would cite the source, but it was included in the documents here. These items may be significant because I did notice that there was a particular piece of info that they left out, and that is that if we go over to page 64 of the case file, there is one specific item that I did not see on that list, and on this page 64, you can see that that the items that they entered into evidence were photographs of the victim, which they took themselves, and he had a billfold on him without an ID because, as we said originally, Paul Rubin was an unidentified victim. There were the two pieces of adhesive tape that were used to have the cipher taped to his abdomen. He was wearing eyeglasses, the spectacles that you heard of, and the document. That's the cipher. Some sources say that it was on a 7x3 piece of paper. Other sources say that it was on a 7x4 piece of paper. Either way, I thought that's kind of small. That's definitely smaller than a notebook or the typical size notebook. It sounds like it's a large index card, actually. But number 6 on their list of items that were entered into evidence, a plastic cylinder with aluminum caps. And I actually misread that the first time. I thought it was just plastic cylinder with aluminum cap. And I was like, oh, well, obviously, this is the vial that he had that was containing the cyanide. Hey, the mystery's over. Everything has been solved. This was a suicide. This wasn't a homicide. His mother's theory was right. He committed suicide because he was a student at NYU. His performance had suffered in school, and he was not doing very well, so he carried this in the cylinder with an aluminum cap. But I actually read it a second time, and it says plastic cylinder with aluminum caps. Now I've been around a lot of vials. I've been around a lot of little plastic things that have fluids in them, and I was like, caps. What exactly do they mean by that? And we're going to find that that is not so open and shut, because the item that they are talking about, well, I will just read about that. Specimen Q6. It is a plastic cylinder with aluminum ends, a cylinder that is approximately 6 inches long and had been broken open when received. It contains no explosives or anything to suggest that it connected with any explosive or explosive devices. Through the center of the cylinder is an aluminum wire, and the construction of this instrument indicates that it is more probably, well, I'll just go ahead and read the next line. This is something that is known as a dosimeter, DOSIMETER. Now, I'm not a scientist, I'm the first one to admit it. This is the first time I've ever heard that word. But if you look at a photo of a dosimeter, you can see that there are indeed multiple layers of, well, aluminum. I think that would make sense, and that would be fair to say. And sure, it didn't contain any explosives or anything like that. I don't know if that would be a suitable thing to keep cyanide in, or I'm almost certain that if he had any type of cyanide anywhere stored in any type of container, some sort of residue would have been left behind, and people would have been aware that this was how he transported the cyanide. But people do that in different ways. The serial killer Leonard Lake, who was one of the Boneyard killers, even had cyanide sewn into his clothing, and he cut that open, removed the, I believe it was a capsule, and then he ingested that, and that's how he committed suicide. But yes, this was a dosimeter. It's the other name for it that I found on Google was an ion chamber. So it's kind of odd that that article left that out, but it does say very clearly in the file that it was entered into evidence. Okay, I'd like to read another small article. This is by United Press, but it was included in the case file. And by United Press, FBI seeking key to dead man's note. Philadelphia, January 21st. The FBI agents took over a mysterious suicide case today. They're already saying that it is a suicide, because the name Dulles appeared in a coded note taped to the abdomen of a man found dead of cyanide poisoning. Special Agent FBI Agent Ray J. Abataccio, that's a hard one for me because there's a hyphen in it, said his office was trying to learn the identity of a young man and is tracing his movements to the international airport where a soldier found the body yesterday. Curious effects. The case contained all the elements of a cloak and dagger spy thriller, with the coded note furnishing the most mysterious gimmick. A coroner's examiner said the note fluttered to the floor of the city morgue when he removed the 5-inch strip of tape over the man's navel. The note contained several symbols in addition to the word Dulles. Police said a broken glass vial, that would actually be the oximeter if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the ion chamber, a .38 caliber cartridge shell, a photograph of a small plane with a Nazi swastika on its tail was found in the pocket of the sports jacket the man was wearing. And this one, though, does leave out that he had the other photograph was of the sculpture The Thinker by Rodin. And the .38 caliber cartridge shell, I think if it's, you get the idea if it says it's a shell, it had been fired. And some people, even in the FBI file, they're documenting notations from people. They're saying, maybe this is a clue, 38 days, 38 minutes, 38 months, 38 years. Maybe the number 38 will have some significance. If you'd like to hear more about the number 38, I invite you to read Gareth Penn's book, Times 17. There are loads of things in there. Thick glasses. Another photograph was a snapshot of the statue The Thinker was in the man's wallet. No identification cards were in the wallet, and yes, he was an unidentified person, but very shortly after, they figured it out and his parents identified him. The 190-pound man was wearing informal clothing, including a sports jacket bearing the label of a Fifth Avenue firm in New York. Dr. Edward Burke of the Police Crime Laboratory said the man had been wearing very thick glasses, so thick that they were almost magnifying glasses. An autopsy failed to disclose the cause of death, and the city chemist who analyzed the contents of the man's stomach later said the presence of cyanide was revealed. And just to be clear, they say the amount of cyanide that was in his body was enough to have killed 10 people, 10 grown men. As far as the weight of 190 pounds, I believe I read in this file that Paul Rubin was 6'1", so he's still a teenager at this time. A little bit of background on Paul Rubin's academic work that is available here. He's studying chemistry at NYU. He was someone who had a lot of big ideas, but he wasn't performing very well in school, even to the point of where his mother was thinking about pulling him out, and I guess they're behind his tuition, thinking about pulling him out of school if he doesn't get his grades up. And there's the term, gifted underachiever. I don't exactly think that Paul Rubin would fit that model of being a gifted underachiever, maybe a gifted underperformer, because it seems like he had so many big ideas about the world, and he's even talking with one of his friends who's named Benjamin Birnbaum about how he has like a lot of opinions about the political system, international politics. The United Nations should have more power than the United States government, or it should be some sort of superseding entity, as well as being vastly opposed to fascism and communism. But because it's 1953, I don't mean to go off on a tangent. That's one of the reasons why they thought that this cipher might actually be something tied to espionage, because they're like, what if this is connected to the Soviet Union or some other communist group is trying to send a message to someone some way, somehow. But if we go back to that first news article that I was reading, when they give his mother's theory about how he may have committed suicide by trying to incorporate himself into a world of mystery and add this element of something that sounds like it was right out of a science fiction novel when all the newspapers are talking about this, a story that is right out of the science fiction magazines. I think she's trying to say that's exactly what Paul Rubin would have wanted. Now, that was her theory. This is still an unsolved case, but I want to read something else that was included here, and this is talking about some other comments that his mother made. She stated that the subject, referring to Paul Rubin, always wanted to act like a person of some importance, and since he had been a failure in school, he might have committed suicide. She stated the subject, in attaching the note to his body, tried to surround himself in mystery. Mrs. Rubin advised today Coroner Joseph Ominski and member of the Philadelphia Police Department visited her on January 27, 1953. Mrs. Rubin stated she believes the Brooklyn Astrophysical Association is a figment of a subject's imagination. Philadelphia will attempt to locate Milton H. Rothman and ascertain if he was acquainted with the subject. Okay, I don't want to jump ahead too much because as they are learning more about this guy, um, about Paul Rubin, one of the things is that he belonged to the Brooklyn Astrophysical Association, or that is something that he told people about. And they're thinking that some way, somehow, this Brooklyn Astrophysical Association may have been some type of front for something to do with another foreign government, or that he may have been interacting with another foreign government, but that is all theoretical. And he also was described by his parents as the type of person that you'd have to force him out of the house. He did not want to leave his room. They absolutely reject any of these theories that he has any connection to anything related to espionage. But it's some things to consider and to think about. But when they have that line in the news article about how they believe that he left the house and he seemed happy, the exact quotation was composed and happy. I want to share some things with you guys about how people think when they're between the ages of 18 and 22, especially males, because I expect with females it's pretty different. And I don't, no, I didn't have the opportunity to meet Paul Rubin. I'm not a psychic. I can't read like energy fields and talk to anybody beyond the grave, but I do notice some things about him. And not only did he have that gifted underperformer mindset, but also, but the years of 18 to 22 are very hormonal. And this is going to sound weird, but you know how people get the sex talk or something when they're 11, 12, or 13? They really need to also get a talk when they're 18, especially males. I only say that because I'm a male and I haven't really spent those years as a female. And they need to get the talk and they need to hear that, hey, between the years of 18 to 22, your hormones are going to get out of control. You're going to have emotional mood swings like you've never experienced before. You're going to have highs and lows like you've never experienced before. And you're going to really, really think about some weird, crazy stuff. And it's really good to have good people in your life that you can talk to about those things and that you can bond with. But mostly internally, just recognizing that this is normal. So when I heard that there's someone who has all of these big ideas about the world, about the United Nations, about science fiction, and he wants to have this aura of importance, but he's really underperforming in school, even to the point where he might have to, his parents might stop paying for his tuition, they might take him out of NYU. Then that may have been a blow. And you might be wondering one thing. Why was Paul Rubin in Philadelphia at that time? And I'm going to tell you the flat out answer going through this entire case file. I'm not completely sure, other than the fact that they said he had no appointments there, and they tried to review some things like addresses that had been scribbled on paper. As far as I know, that didn't turn up much because he was he was found dead, and this is an unsolved case. But he did have an exam that was scheduled for around the time that he went missing. And yeah, pretty much other sources are referring to this as a disappearance. I think it's even here in the file. At times they refer to it as a disappearance. He was seen, though, on the 19th of January, and then it's more or less he disappeared for an amount of time, and then he's found dead with a cipher taped to his body. The only other thing that I would want to share is that, another term of similarity, Paul Rubin used the fictional name Galen Templar, or the pseudonym Galen Templar, and I would just like to read a little bit more about that. Subject was found dead at International Airport in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on the 1st of January 1953. Taped to the body was a piece of paper 7 by 4 inches with unintelligible words and ciphers thereon. Parents advise the deceased was a member of the Brooklyn Astrophysical Society, the BAS, advised deceased rarely left house after school, couldn't chase him out of the house. Mother of deceased advised she told the deceased that if he did not pass examinations at NYU, she was going to take him out of school. She stated that the deceased always wanted to act like he was a person of some importance, and since he had been a failure in school, may have committed suicide. She stated that her son, in attaching the note to his body, tried to surround himself with mystery. Benjamin Mayer Birnbaum advised, and he spent hours with the deceased discussing world problems. He is the friend that the authorities interviewed, and advised that the deceased adopted a name, Galen Templar, after Simon Templar, a fictional character. Advised the deceased talked of using code. Birnbaum advised that he never sent nor received a coded message from the deceased. Okay, as far as creating this fictional alias, this is also something that people do between the ages of 18 to 22. I even did this for a while. My alias was Mick McPatrick. It was kind of silly, but that is something that I did. It's all about escape and about thinking that if you just change your name temporarily, then your life is going to get better, or that you will be accepted, and of course, through acceptance, then you'll gain access to sexual partners, if I can be very graphic. So these things seem very normal, but they also show that someone is very frustrated with their underperforming status in life. Does that actually mean that this was a murder? I can't say that, or murder or suicide. I can't say in one way or another because it's an unsolved case. If you can't tell by the way that I'm sharing this info, I lean toward what his mother said, that this was a suicide. However, sometimes parents try to cover up for their family members. They just can't accept that he could have been involved with anything to do with espionage, that this Brooklyn Astrophysical Society could have been a front for some type of spy ring. They just can't accept that something like that could have been going on. And you would think through a university someone could have been indoctrinated into the group. It's possible. It's possible, and we'll see why, because in the second half of this program, we will look at the contents of the Rubin Cipher, and what do these clues mean, and how should we respond to them. But what do you think? Do you think this was a murder or a suicide? Or, I mean, possibly accidental death? Although if somebody is ingesting 10 times the amount of cyanide that would have killed a 6'1", 190-pound man, I really would just put the two options on the table. Murder or suicide? What do you think? All right, well, everybody, please respond to that question, and we will be right back after this.
You are listening to Blackbox Online Radio.
This show is brought to you by TeeSpring. Feel free to check out the merchandise. Almost all sizes and colors are listed.
Blackbox Online Radio.
And remember YouTube Premium. You can download the show, take it on the go, anywhere and anyhow.
Please like and subscribe. Grazie mille.
Okay, hello, and we are back. I said in this segment that we would continue talking about the death of Paul Rubin, but I wanted this to focus on the cryptic message that had been left taped to his body on the 20th of January 1953. And I should also share that I'm not citing this from the case file, but from other websites that I had been reading. They say that his mother did see him with pieces of tape on the day that he was last seen in Brooklyn, New York, but bear in mind that he did pass away in Philadelphia. I mean, I don't know how reliable things on the internet are. I get accused of true crime blabbing, and it's certainly true when I do it. But I wanted to look at the cipher and the actual contents, and we can just make some observations. The first line seems to contain quite a few English words. There's the word dig, is, saw, thing, math, ully, dulles, and everyone's focusing in on the word dulles because it's the name of a prominent politician, but it's actually hyphenated. It's a math, ully, dulles, krakenloven, meteori, aieli. I don't know about you guys, but I'm noticing an overwhelming presence from some type of Germanic language. Of course, English is a Germanic language, but I'm noticing something that really seems quite similar to German. And when I hear the name Paul Rubin and some guy from Brooklyn, New York, I tend to think of the Yiddish language. And that'll be incorporated throughout the entirety of the discussion here. But, for example, in German, krank means sick, like Krankenhaus is like a hospital, Krankenschwester is a nurse. So Krankenlaven, that seems to be something to do with sickness. Now, people also have theorized that that meteori there doesn't actually mean anything to do with meteors. That could have something to do with a meeting, and dig is in, saw the thing, math, ully dulles, I'm sick of loving something, a meeting, and that's just guesswork though. Meaning that this isn't something that is like a substitution cipher. This might not even be an actual cryptogram. It's almost like what would it be? Just like a made up language or something. I guess that is somewhat cryptological. But we also can see other things like on the third line, or fourth actually, because the third line is, well, anyway, the fourth line says the word sprechen, which seems really very similar to the German word sprechen. And when I first read that, that's what tipped me off to these Germanic clues. It looks like it said sprechen meine Name, which means speak my name, but it's actually sprechen Mike Trena, and I'm noticing some type of German, maybe Yiddish influence. Now, this next part of the fourth line, Vodrus colum, that made me think not of the Germanic language, but that looked Russian, like Fedor. Maybe you're thinking of Fedor Dostoevsky, and that was just the first Fedor I could think of. But I put that into Google Translate, and it came out as Hungarian, not Fodrus colon, but just the Fodrus part. OIER, though, that is also very similar to something Germanic. Oyer, Eier. The Eier is actually means eggs in German, and I put eggs into the Yiddish translation on Google Translate. The first time I've ever looked up any words in Yiddish, and it turns out the Yiddish word for eggs is eggs. Who would have thought that? Yiddish eggs, that's where it comes from. Maybe, who knows? But there's also this word here that seems to have another Germanic clue, and before the word conant, which everybody is zoning in on, it says Driek, D-R-I-E-K. Some people think that means die, but I mean, I thought of the German word drei, meaning three, eins, zwei, drei, 1, 2, 3, and then conant, and then after that, it really looks like it's saying astronaut. But I mean, 1953, is that actually astronaut? Maybe something to do with astronomy or astrophysics, even. I had the craziest idea, though, about the next word, where it says Ivondiolon, Evangelion. I thought that that was Ivan the Terrible, because the first one, Iyvon, that made me think of Yvonne, and Diolon, that made me think of the word dolorous or dolor in Spanish too, meaning pain, something that's bad, so I thought of Ivan the Terrible, but that's not even a method to solve a cipher or some type of message like that. That would be under the assumption that it's a made-up language. Now, There's one more point, though, that people have said that is not my own original observation, and that the DESCETH is actually meant to be death. But then there's the word MEGLEAGNS, or LEGNA, megligna, something to that effect. And I was really not sure what about that. I thought of megalomania, but that would almost be like someone has just found a way to pull out certain letters of English words and replace them with other words, or maybe a different language. It doesn't even have to be German or Yiddish. Swedish is a Germanic language, Norwegian. But this next word was one of my favorites in this one, Malsbergian. And I said, I knew exactly about what it's like to make up a pseudonym for yourself when you're 18 years old. Well, I also used the word Malsbergian, not Malsbergnian, but Malsbergian. I used to say that all the time. That was when I was much older. I came up with it because of the talk show host Steve Malsberg, and he hosted the Steve Malsberg show on Newsmax, and now he's on RT, I think. But I called it the Malsbergian argument, or the Malsbergian principle, where he would initiate a debate with people, but he would always just stay on the surface and never get to the heart of the issue, where there would be like, I mean, just like a hypothetical example of a Malsbergian argument would be, we need to spend less money. And then someone would say, money can be spent on many things. Yeah, I know, but we need to spend fewer amounts of dollars. But if we had dollars, we could buy this or we could buy that. It's just like talking in circles, sort of, but I like to say it's a superficial argument that never gets to the heart of the issue. But no, I mean, I highly doubt that he was using that in the same way that I did. It's based on some talk show host that was on the air 50 years after he had passed away, but instead, other people had proposed that this Malsbergian might actually mean Salzburg. The A is capitalized, and so it means like Olsbergian, and that could simply be Salzburg. Grele, I'm really not too sure. Now, one of the larger clues, almost everybody thinks that the final three letters of this, PER, stand for his initials, Paul Emanuel Rubin. And if this was a suicide, I think that would be quite a way to conclude a suicide note, to sign off, to give a signature. PER, Paul Emanuel Rubin. I didn't think twice about that, though. When I first read it, I was like, oh, he just means person, like humanity. He signed by a person. But I think, no, I think after putting some more thought into it, I'm tempted to agree that that's PER for Paul Emanuel Rubin, but I think that would also suggest that it was a suicide. Alia Kauai, Kaui, I'm not sure the origins of that. It really does look a little bit like another German word. You know, like über alles, alle ausnahmsfrei, like meaning like everyone, or all. And the other words, though, that do seem to have Germanic origins are want and datum. But Taiwood, Janusi, Kitele, I have really no idea. That definitely appears to be some type of name. And people have gone through these things. They're talking about how this could be some type of instructions for somebody to meet a particular person, and where would they meet them? Throughout these mathematical things here that appear to be binary of sorts. But then you also have 7469931, 7469931, 7469921. I'm gonna flat out tell you, I do not have any response to these mathematical number things here because I'm not a math guy. I can guess around with languages, but the only thing, though, that I can say is some type of contribution is that it really appears that his cipher was heavily influenced by either the German or Yiddish language. And when I was reading through the FBI case file, someone wrote down the exact same thing. They said Yiddish influence, and I don't really think that requires an enormous amount of intelligence or observation. And he could be pulling from other influences. And there's always the possibility with unsolved ciphers that it could be meaningless, it could be gibberish, meant to keep you guessing forever. But after the solution was provided to the Zodiac Z340 recently, I'm really not going to be playing that card too much, only because everybody thought that that was a cipher that had no meaning, it had no solution, it was a red herring, it was a dud, and it turned out that it actually does have some meaning. So, what do you think about the solution to the cipher? Do you think that it's actually trying to get the attention of somebody? Do you think that it's talking about these things, or maybe the capital letters have a particular meaning? Or in themselves, or do you think that this is just a meaningless thing where someone is pulling out words that are similar to German or Yiddish? Sprechen Mike Trainer Folders Cola Meyer, Sprechen Mike Trainer Folders Cola Meyer, Drei Konent Astronautl, Yvonne Diolen, Deskes Megalernis Melsbergian Grela. It seems like somebody may have attempted to create some type of meaning, some type of invented language. And there are things like this that exist in the military, cryptological linguists and such, where some people have a military code, and it has they use these types of things, like they're talking in a very specific way. But the one last point that I would say before signing off is Dulles begins with the letter D, and then the second name there is Conant, which begins with the letter C. D and C, and that was something else that I read online. Someone was sharing the idea that they thought this was District of Columbia, and that this is meant to get the attention of somebody in Washington, D.C. But that's where I'm going to have to leave it at for now, and I really wish I could contribute more of a possible solution, other than there's the number 3 Conant, Ivan the Terrible, something like 3 times greater than Ivan the Terrible. Something about that was one of my own original observations. I'm not a cipher guy, I'm not good with ciphers. About 3 weeks before David Oranchak, Jarl Van Eyck, and Sam Blake solved the 340, I put out my own potential solution to the 340. I was wrong, they were right. But Dirt Poor Richard, the person who recommended this episode, also proposed something that was an alternative solution to the Z340. You can hear that on his channel, Dirt Poor Richard. I do thank him for suggesting this idea for the episode. Much appreciated. And anybody can put their ideas in the comment section below. Write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. You can follow the show on Facebook. There's a link in the description box, as well as the links to the TeeSpring page. Thank you to everybody who bought t-shirts. And of course, you can send things to the DMs on Instagram. All of these are filling up with suggestions for new cases. I'll try to get to as many of them as I can. Much appreciated to anybody who has listened to this and weigh in on this. I'm a big newcomer to this. I'm not going to lie to you guys. Until about 2 weeks ago, I had never heard of this case. So I got online and I started reading up, and I found that these 142 pages of FBI documents had been uploaded online. Big thank you again to Cipher Foundation. Absolutely. And I think that's all for me now. So, thank you guys. Please put your responses down below.
This has been a production of Black Box Online Radio, hosted by Ned. Thanks for tuning in. Black Box Online Radio comes to you 3 times a week, covering serial killers and true crime, but any subject is fair game.
So see you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.